What was the Facebook friend suggestion that made you go okay, that's just creepy? How did FB know to suggest them? I am Italian, living in Italy. In 2007 I visited Vietnam with my then wife. Our guide for the northern part of the country was a nice young lady who worked at Hanoi University and was incredibly fluent in Italian, having studied in my country some time before. We had no common acquaintances in Italy or anywhere else, and I have never been in the Italian city where she studied. I did not have a FB account back then, and opened it a couple of years later. After a couple of months, I get a friend suggestion for the lady, whom I actually had almost forgot. I asked her friendship, which she accepted, and noticed we had no other friend in common. In addition, I was her only Italian friend on FB. I was impressed and a little frightened. It was one of the reasons I closed my FB account few months later, and never opened a new one. Maybe she remembered your name and had checked your profile. Deleted my Facebook years ago, made a fake one with a completely different email address to get a free game. It gave me all of my old friends' suggestions. So the thing I'm gathering from this thread is that oftentimes if you look a person up, you'll show up on their suggested friends. I've used Facebook to look people up for years. I'm sure there have been a load of people really creeped out to see this vaguely familiar girl as a friend suggestion. Dang. I am so stupid. I looked up an old GF. Didn't even find her. Few days later she sends me a friend request. I didn't make the connection till just now. Crap on a cracker. I have one girl they keep recommending who lives in another state, and we have zero friends in common. It makes no sense. A real estate agent I had called a few times about seeing a property. We had no shared friends and I had not added her to my contact list. Even posting this makes me nervous. I don't trust FB one bit. I have never had a Facebook account, but my so has one. When we had been dating a few months it suggested my so and my little brother as friends. They hadn't met at that point, didn't go to the same school and have no link besides me that I am aware of. I'm sure it's just a coincidence but I was a bit weirded out. My landlord. I only had his phone number saved in my phone, no mutual friends. I hadn't even downloaded the Facebook app as I only use the browser version on my phone, and it still suggested him. My ex. We were never friends on Facebook while dating. We broke up over a year ago. We have few mutual friends, but she's always my top friend suggestion, because Facebook can tell we're posting pictures of the same baby. I was having a text conversation with my girlfriend about wanting to buy a new suitcase with expanding shelves. I never googled it. I never spoke it. I just sent one text. The next day, my Facebook is full of ads for this style of suitcase. My friend who lived a few houses down had a baby girl they named Ella, and I was talking to my husband about how we needed to go visit them and see baby Ella for the first time. The next friend suggestion was someone named Ella Newborn. That is freaking scary. Whenever a new editor at work starts, within a day I can check Facebook and see them as suggested friends. But this is probably because everyone in my work will add them, and Facebook sees that. I have never used Facebook. Personally, about 7 years ago, our company lawyer suggested making Facebook and Twitter accounts for the company. Can't remember why, to hold the name or something. So, boss tells me to do it. Okay, I set it up with all company info, not one personal thing used. Towards the end of the setup, it says, you may know these people, and one of them was a sheik I used to bang on the down low. Nope the frick out and never logged in with that account ever again. So, this the kind of story you are looking for, right? When I was using Tinder, I would always get friend suggestions of girls I matched with, almost immediately sometimes. I would chalk that up to girls that you match with looking you up on Facebook. Lots of people do this, but no one will admit to it because it sounds creepy. In the car with my co-worker, talking about a former co-worker, we only mentioned her nickname, not her name. When I looked at my phone she was my first friend suggestion. Also not a friend suggestion but equally creepy. My boyfriend bought a computer chair, but it was a tiny bit small for his height. He said there was a big and tall version, but he decided against it and went for the regular one because the size difference was so minor and not worth the $100 price difference. When I looked at my phone, I got an ad for the exact big and tall chair, exact color preference. There were like 8 color options and it advertised it to me in blue, which is what he got, but we never discussed exact everything. Creeped me out, man. This happens to me too from time to time. One time, my husband and I were talking about how we would like a yellow KitchenAid mixer. I didn't Google it, it wasn't on any Pinterest boards or Amazon wish lists, and it was the first ad I see when I opened the app. And what do you know? It was the yellow one that was pictured. So creepy and not cool. When I was in my early 20s, I used Tumblr to find girls to sext with, and it actually worked. One girl and I became really good long distance friends who would just do cam shows for each other once in a while. Eventually she got a BF. So we obviously stopped sexting and eventually stopped talking. I am now 25 and she sometimes shows up on my recommended friends list. Never synced FB with contacts. We never added each other on FB. This was also 2 phones ago. I have not talked to her since I was 20 or 21. I've had sexless, but similar experiences. I think if a person searches a name, their profile will show up in the friends suggested list. When you're in the military, you tend to get a lot of friend requests and profiles of hot girls with only 1 or 2 friends, and the profile is only a few months old. All you have to do is ignore the request and say to yourself, not today, ISIS. Or someone trying to scam you. This isn't exactly the same thing, because we had a lot of mutual friends, but Facebook would not stop recommending this guy who stalked me at school. He was always my top friend suggestion for months and I couldn't help but feel stalked on Facebook too. Without knowing how it actually works, I'm guessing it's because he was looking up your profile a lot. My uncle and cousins. That might not sound weird, but I was using a pseudonym and wasn't friends with any of my family on there. I also live about 120 miles away in a small town and they all live in a city, so there's no way that this was an accidental thing. I am in charge of ordering supplies for my company. Because of this, I frequently get ad suggestions for things that I regularly buy with company cards, etc. One time we needed to purchase large, dehydrating ovens from Cabela's, an outdoors store. I knew there was a Cabela's store near one of our warehouses, so using my work computer, I looked up the store number and gave them a call to see if they had any in stock. They did, and I promptly sent a driver to pick up 2 of the ovens. Fast forward 2 or 3 days later, I'm scrolling through Facebook on my personal phone and there is an advertisement for a huge sale on dehydrating ovens from multiple vendors. I never once typed the words dehydrating or oven into my phone or computer, simply looked up the number for the closest store. When I was like 10, 25 now, I used to talk to this girl and her brother on this random forum site for kids. Lost touch after a couple of years. They never even knew my real name. Never looked them up and it was several email addresses ago. Both of them randomly appeared in my suggested friends on Facebook last year. This one is the winner, to me at least. That's crazy weird. When I lived and worked abroad for 3 months, somehow Facebook suggested colleagues and roommates as friends. That was before I had added literally anyone, so it must have picked suggestions by location while filtering out all the neighbors. The fact that it was in the Gambia, West Africa, somehow freaked me out even more. While renovating an apartment, Facebook suggested I add the tenant. I didn't meet her or know her name. It was based on my location. Spooky. I work retail and we have a lot of customers who are regulars. A few of them started showing up in my suggested friends. My namesake, which was weird because my name and surname combination is pretty rare, was curious until I discovered it was just an account I created when I was 8. LOL, best one here. A guy I hooked up with years ago. We never even exchanged numbers, just messaged through a Cupid. I never knew his last name. A month or so after, he was in my recommend list. I was more than a little weirded out. I went out on 2 dates with a guy from Tinder like 2 years ago and FB still occasionally suggests him as a friend. I'm a headhunter, and I've had a few clients and candidates pop up in my suggested friends on FB. I do not have mutuals with any of them. My work email isn't tied at all to my FB, and when I am doing work at home I use an entirely different computer which isn't logged into FB. I presume it's because they've all stalked me online at some point, in the curious way, not the creepy way. I've had more than one admit to doing it and I don't necessarily blame them because some headhunters can be shady, and didn't just stop at my LinkedIn profile. So the FB algorithm put 2 and 2 together. Real late to this one, but Facebook wants me to friend the guy who raped me in 1998. Only thing we have in common is our high school. No mutual friends, and it doesn't suggest the 800 other people from my high school. There's no way Facebook. Frick you. What I gather from reading through this thread is that Facebook suggests people who have looked up your profile recently. So, you better block that guy if you haven't already. D. This man who was in the same waiting area as me waiting for our takeout at a Mexican restaurant was suggested to me on Instagram the following day. Be right back deleting Instagram. I haven't had the Facebook app on any of my phones in over 6 years. I rarely ever used it, yet it was the #1 app draining my battery. It was obviously doing some in the background. I got a suggestion to add a woman who lived in a bordering state and had no mutual friends. I ignored it thinking it was a bot or a cam girl. The next day she shows up where I work as the new sales agent. I have no clue why FB suggested her, but I deleted it shortly after. Yeah, that would do it. My name on Facebook isn't my maiden name, so if friends' suggestions show up because they've searched for me, I still can't explain this. When I was 15/16 some random dude found me on AIM and started chatting me up. He was very charming and kind. He was older, late 20s. Of course, as a 15-year-old girl, this wasn't weird to me, but flattering. Now, of course, I see it as creepy, because it is. Anyway, he lived in Chicago if I recall correctly, hours away from me, in another state. So it didn't strike me as weird at the time. We talked a lot. He eventually jokingly got me to agree that if I was single at 18, we'd meet and give a relationship a go. God, now that I'm in my 30s and a parent, it's so awful to think about. Luckily I wasn't single when I turned 18. We lost touch probably my freshman year of college. Anyway, a couple of years ago, he shows up on my suggested friends list. It's so creepy. We had no friends in common and still don't live near one another, so I have no idea why he popped up there. I haven't added a new friend on Facebook in a while because I just don't check it often. Checked one time and they suggested several of my co-workers who had nothing in common with me. No mutual friends, no mutual interests, and I'd never linked my jobs to my Facebook profile. Also, girls I matched with on Tinder like 4 years ago get suggested a lot too. If you've ever checked Facebook through the same internet connection router as your co-workers, that could explain that. It wasn't a friend suggestion, but I think it still fits what you're asking for. Years ago, I started getting ads on Facebook for LGBT youth groups in my area. I'd only come out to my best friend and my mom so far. The only site on which I was doing anything LGBT related was Reddit, at least with the same email as my Facebook, and none of my friends around my age were out at all, even to me. Actually, it turned out that I was the suggestion. Years ago, I went on a handful of dates with a young woman who, well, let's just say that we didn't end up being compatible. There was nothing overtly wrong with her, but we weren't a good match in terms of interests or personalities. Unfortunately, I was apparently alone in holding that perspective, and the act of voicing it, in as gentle and friendly a manner as I could, led to a less than comfortable final conversation. It wasn't particularly pleasant, but I figured it would be the last that I heard from her. Then, a couple of months later, I got an angry text message. From what I was able to discern, the young woman had been looking through her list of suggested friends on Facebook, and my picture had popped up. This was, or so it was implied, somehow my fault, despite the fact that I used the site about as often as I used my toilet plunger. When I tried to explain as much, I was accused of stalking her profile, which seemed like a ludicrous suggestion to me, given that she had set the entire thing to be private. Our text-based exchange prompted me to look. I'll admit, now, I don't know any of this for sure, but I think OkCupid may have played a role in that and wanted recommendation cropping up. That's where the young woman and I had initially connected, and this was back in the days when the site listed profile visitors as stalkers. Maybe I'm putting a little bit too much weight on the term, but it seemed odd that it would be applied to me without some kind of prompting. Mind you, I'd made about as much use of that site as I had of Facebook by that point, but it doesn't seem like a stretch to surmise that the two of them were sharing data. I suppose it's also more comforting than other options. TLDR. I was recommended to a girl that I'd dated. She assumed that it was my fault. Haven't seen you in forever, Aziz. Freaky AF that they all work together. For me it was Instagram suggesting Facebook friends. I had a new email and new Instagram account. Facebook somehow figured out it was me and suggested my Facebook friends to follow. One time I worked at a place where someone had created a Facebook profile with a fake name, entered the absolute minimum information, no profile picture. He didn't add any friends and didn't search for people on Facebook. He only created the profile to be able to like a page to get a discount on some hunting supplies. He said it would suggest people he worked with and family as friends. He said he didn't use a phone number to access it or anything. Like other people mentioned in this thread, I have had friend suggestions of people I only once or twice interacted with over the phone. Many of them didn't even know my name. After a bit of digging, I found that Creepy FB would suggest you friends if they saved you as a contact on their phone and they share their phone book with FB. Deleted FB in 2012. One of the best decisions I ever made. When I first got Facebook last year, I had no contacts and one of the first suggestions was a dude I worked with 10 years ago who lives 12 hours from me. The frick? When you see a random person at the mall that you don't really recognize but you swear you've seen somewhere and then you get home and bam, Facebook suggestion. Made a new profile to start fresh. Hadn't added anyone. Posted pictures, etc. First friend suggestion was my ex-husband, who I was starting fresh to get away from. No thanks, Facebook. I was pretty spooked when my Facebook suggested my psychologist, someone who was not recommended to me by anybody in my friends or professional circle. This is funny because I just got matched with a dude I played against in Little League maybe 25 years ago and never saw again. He was in butthole. Woman who works for the same company as me. She's gay, I'm gay, we have no mutual friends whatsoever and work in completely different fields. Indeed, I have only met her once or twice in passing. My Facebook doesn't list who I work for, but of course Facebook knows our IP addresses. So it matched me to her because, literally, it knows that we are both homosexual. Frick, that. Mine always suggest people whom we have no friend connections but I often see them around town. I swear Facebook auto stalks for me. This girl I met, and fricked, at a party 2 days before. I didn't even know her last name. Then I realized she knew mine and must have checked my profile, so Facebook made this suggestion. I mean, that's definitely not the worst friend suggestion you could get. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.